Ever since we were little kids, stories have been a part of our lives. Reading books like The Little Prince or watching movies like The Lion King during daytime or even before bed became a part of our lives where we could escape away from reality. This helped us escape into another world. Little did we know that literature is more than that. It's been transcending over time, yet it's still with us, shaping our lives, forming critical parts of today's happenings. What relevance does literature have in society or in your life? What does it teach you and how does it bring impact to your life? Magandang buhay everyone! This is the video discussion of English 8 Afro-Asian Literature. In this learning module, we're going to talk about literature, its nature, definition, and its significance. Here is the most essential learning competency for this lesson. Analyze literature as a mirror to a shared heritage of people with diverse backgrounds. Let us first define literature. Etymologically, the term derives from Latin literatura or literatura, which means writing formed with letters. Literature is the verbal expression of human imagination and one of the primary means by which a culture transmits itself. That is the definition from Ellis of 1989. Literature is everything in print. Literature is any written work. Based on these definitions, literature contains universal ideas, human imagination, and human interests that written in any writings and use language as a medium to express human ideas and feelings. Meanwhile, based on different point of views, you can define literature in a lot of ways. Literature is art, literature is fictional, literature is expressive, literature is effective, it is aesthetic, and literature is language. Let us now proceed to the nature of literature. The first is language. The language that is used by literature differs from ordinary spoken or written language. Literature uses special words, structures, and characteristics. Primarily, the language of literature differs from ordinary language in three ways. First, language is concentrated and meaningful. Language say relevant and serious things that if you reflect is deeper than what you think. Second, its purpose is not simply to explain, argue, or make a point, but rather to give a sense of pleasure in the discovery of a new experience. And third, it demands intense concentration from the readers. It indicates that the language of literature has originality, quality, creativity, and pleasure. Proceeding to the classifications. Literature has three classifications. First is structure, second is form, and third is genre. These classifications have its own classifications as well. Let us proceed to structure. The first classification of structure is fiction. Fiction is a literary work of imaginative narration, either oral or written, fashioned to entertain and to make the readers think, and more so to feel. The second is nonfiction. This is a literary work of real-life narration or expression based on history and facts, whose main thrust is an intellectual appeal to convey facts, theories and generalizations, or concepts about a particular topic. Are you confused? Here is an easy way to classify books, TV shows, plays, or films as to they are fiction or non-fiction. When we talk about fiction, you are talking about the plot, the characters, and the setting that are created by the author's imagination. Examples of fiction are short stories, novels, and fairy tales. The author of a fiction book might use real places as a setting for his story, or he can create a fictional town that might be inspired by a city that exists in reality. In fantasy and science fiction books, it's common that writers describe a made-up world and events that have never taken place in reality. However, they often use real scientific research to make the plot more believable. Despite the fact that actual research is used, these books are still considered fictional. In contrast, Nonfiction refers to stories that are based on events that actually happened in reality. The characters are real people too. Nonfiction books are purely factual. While an author of a fiction story can let his imagination run wild to make it as exciting as possible, a nonfiction story has to be true from the first until the last letter. Two examples of nonfiction are biographies and essays. Still, the fact that a book is based on a true story doesn't mean that the use of techniques that could make the text more appealing isn't allowed. Many authors of nonfiction literature use descriptive language to provoke the reader's emotions. This craft of portraying real stories in a vivid, powerful way, almost making it seem that they are made up, is called creative nonfiction. Skilled authors make the line between fiction and nonfiction very thin and blurry, describing fictional characters as if they were real people, and real people as if they were characters of a fantasy book. When you are not sure whether what you're holding in your hands is fiction or nonfiction, ask yourself, does this book report the truth? If it does, it's certainly nonfiction. If it embellishes the truth, it's fiction. Let us now proceed to the forms of literature. We have prose and we have poetry. Prose is written in the common flow of language in sentences and paragraphs, which gives information, relates events, express ideas, or present opinions. Meanwhile, poetry is expressed in verse, has measure, rhythm, sound, and imaginative language. This also creates an emotional response to an experience, feeling, or fact. Poetry is a form of literary art that uses aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of language to evoke meanings in addition to or in place of prosaic ostensible meaning, that is, ordinary intended meaning. Poetry has traditionally been distinguished from prose by its being set in verse. Prose is cast in sentences, while poetry in lines. The syntax of prose is dictated by meaning, whereas that of poetry is held across meter or the visual aspects of the poem. The prose is a form of language that possesses ordinary syntax and natural speech rather than a rhythmic structure, in which regard, along with its measurement in sentences rather than lines, it differs from poetry. On the historical development of prose, Richard Graft notes that a novel is a long fictional prose narrative. Meanwhile, the novella exists between the novel and the short story. The publisher Melville House even classifies it as too short to be novel, too long to be a short story. Meanwhile, a dilemma in defining the short story as a literary form is how to or whether one should distinguish it from any short narrative. Apart from its distinct size, various theorists have suggested that the short story has a characteristic subject matter or structure. These discussions often position the form in some relation to the novel. The last classification is genre. We have fiction, we have poetry, we have essay, drama or play, and we also have the arts. All of these are considered genre of literature. This is a calligram by Guillaume Apollinaire. Calligrams are a type of poem in which the written words are arranged in such a way to produce a visual image. Isn't it creative? There you go. We are now done with the discussion of Module 10. Did you learn something today? Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something in this video. See you on our synchronous sessions. Bye!